Harry's wife. Some Indianapolis salt. Hello, I'm H.G. Tudor. You'll recall that back in November, Harry's wife turned up in Indianapolis in order to bore a lot of people spouting some industrial beige. Parts Passim provided information about what went on with the provision of some ridiculous pictures as gifts. You recall, of course, that Harry's wife would expect to be speaking to packed stadia with thousands of people desperate to hear her message. Such is the level of delusion that she operates by as a consequence of her narcissism. It tells her that she is a colossus in the world of public speaking, that everything she has to say is momentous and indeed incredible. Of course, the evidence is far from that. Witness one of the most boring speeches ever given at the Bridgewater Hall in Manchester back in September at the One World Summit, which was just basically Harry's wife recalling the times that she'd been at One World before. It very much was the equivalent of being invited round to a boring neighbour being shown their holiday pictures, not from the holiday they've just had, but ones that they've had in the past. Something you'd rather kill yourself than actually engage in listening to. So for Harry's wife, she expected that she would be talking to packed out stadia, but at best she got a couple of thousand people there, and as we know from the pictures on the night, which showed gaps at the tables, and of course the fact that even Girl Scouts were being encouraged to attend on freebies, that essentially many companies bought tables out of a sense of obligation and tax write-off, and then packed it with employees who otherwise wouldn't have attended if they'd have had to pay their own money. So the attendance was nowhere near as good as it ought to be. But something else has just happened in Indianapolis, and it'd be useful to draw a comparison. The subject matter is completely different, but it just demonstrates how Harry's wife's stock has fallen so low and how she isn't the draw that she thinks she is. An article in American Thinker by Andrea Widberg tells us the turnout for Kirk Cameron's library reading in Indianapolis is astounding. Kirk Cameron, the one-time child sitcom star and evangelical Christian father of 6 children, has written a children's book that encourages old-fashioned virtues, such as kindness, faithfulness, and self-control. When he approached libraries to read his book to children, 54 libraries refused, because the book had a Christian theme, unlike the drag queen readings many of the same libraries promoted. The Indianapolis Public Library, however, reluctantly reversed itself, and thousands of people, adults and children, attended. Even as public and private institutions tried to force transgenderism on the American people, parents still want their children to have a wholesome mental diet. Now, leaving aside the debate about Christianity and transgenderism, that's not really the point of my comment on this particular article, but rather to draw attention to this. More people wanted to turn up to listen to Kirk Cameron, and not somebody who I'm familiar with, and certainly I wouldn't say somebody who's internationally famous. More people wanted to turn up to listen to Kirk Cameron read a children's book than turn up and listen to the clearly internationally well-known Harry's wife give a speech. Ouch. Reading of a children's book trumps the Duchess of Sussex. The article continues. Modern Americans are a tolerant people. Since the gay rights movement began in the late 1960s, they've concluded that gays and lesbians should not have to hide, nor should they be subject to discrimination. Since 2008, Americans have even come to accept gay marriage. What Americans didn't expect was that LGBTQ++ radicals will take over every institution in America, including child-centric institutions, schools, libraries, Disney, and insist that children be taught that biological sex is fake and that the only real thing is feelings, which, of course, must be given reality through potentially deadly and certainly body-destroying hormones, along with mutilating surgery. Civil rights morphed into a deadly fantasy that's systematically being used to strip children's physical integrity and deny people their First Amendment rights. One of the front lines in the battle between radical gender activists and normal people is drag queens. Leftists insist that these usually incompetent performers, who present as grotesque parodies of women and whose humour is entirely centred around sex and fecal matter, must enter traditional children's domains: schools, libraries, street fairs, Christmas shows, etc. And because schools and libraries have come under the sway of leftist administrators, they're completely on board with that programme. That's how it came about that the same libraries that have hosted drag queens on the event's calendar refused to allow Kirk Cameron's reading from his new book, As You Grow, a book about biblical truth. Drag queens, good, timeless values, bad. Let me interject for a moment. Something about religious books and children. When I was little, and this is the author speaking, not me, my father came home from a garage sale with a multi-volume collection of books called Uncle Arthur's Bedtime Stories. I absolutely adored those books, reading them again and again from cover to cover. What my dad didn't realise was that Uncle Arthur was a Seventh-day Adventist and that the content was entirely grounded in the Bible. Despite that, I didn't become a Seventh-day Adventist from reading those books, nor did I become a Christian. I'm still Jewish. However, I did learn important lessons about moral decency, honesty, loyalty, kindness, responsibility, etc. Good religion is not corrupting, it's elevating, and that's true whether you embrace the core doctrinal tenets or not. Back to Indiana. The outcry regarding those libraries that chose drag queens over Cameron was so loud that the Indianapolis Public Library reversed course and begrudgingly allowed Cameron to appear. The response from parents in the region was overwhelming, with thousands showing up to hear from a book that advances the values that make a safe, stable, prosperous society for their children. Now again, leaving aside the obvious political position of the author of the article, what is interesting is to draw a comparison. Harry's wife holds herself out as being the epitome of kindness, empathy, of tolerance, that she is an individual that promotes safety, stability, prosperity, or at least she likes to think that she does. She does this and attends Indianapolis, barely gets a couple of thousand of people to turn up. However, Cameron gets thousands. And what this does is it puts into place very neatly the distinction between the values of Harry's wife and how she's regarded, and how ordinary people are much more concerned with the issues that are described here, and rather than somebody, Harry's wife, who is seen through as both boring. Of course, this takes place in Indianapolis, and for Harry's wife to know that thousands of people turned up for the reading of a children's book compared to perhaps just under a couple of thousand that turned up for her shebang, demonstrates failing popularity on her part and essentially throws some salt in the wounding that she has experienced as a consequence of her own visit to Indianapolis. I'm H.G. Tudor. Thank you for listening.